In our gospel lesson, we read from the Gospel of Luke, the 15th chapter. Sons. The younger son said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance." Then the father divided his estate between them. Soon afterward, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a land far away. There he wasted his wealth through extravagant living. When he had used up his resources, a severe food shortage arose in that country, and he began to be in need. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his field to feed pigs. He longed to eat his fill from what the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have more than enough food? But I'm starving to death. I will get up and go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Take me on as one of your hired hands.' So he got up and went to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then his son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fattened calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting, because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. From the field he approached the house and heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what was going on. The servant replied, 'Your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf, because he received his son back safe and sound.' Then the older son was furious and didn't want to enter in. But his father came out and begged him. He answered his father, 'Look, I've served you all these years. I never disobeyed your instruction. Yet you've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours returned, after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him.' Then his father said, 'Son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.'" The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. It was just about this time of year, 3 years ago, in the summer of 2020, that I was beginning a long-awaited and much-needed 3-month sabbatical. Taking a sabbatical in the middle of the COVID outbreak was certainly not what I had planned for, but it was still a wonderful time away from work. Looking back on that time, it seems rather ironic that, given the fact that the focus of my sabbatical research was technology and how the church can respond and thrive in this digital age, that it was technology that led my wife Debbie and me on our most harrowing adventure of the summer. I preface this story by sharing with you this most indisputable fact: GPS devices lie to you. I've seen stories on the news just recently about not one but 2 instances where someone following their GPS had driven down a boat ramp straight into a lake. GPS devices lie to you. Well, it wasn't quite that bad for Debbie and me, but we still had an adventure that led to this sermon. Our adventure began innocently enough on one Saturday in mid-July. Some dear friends of ours had graciously offered the use of their mountain house near Galax, Virginia, for a week of relaxation and rest. We were excited to begin our time there. As we often do, Debbie and I were using different GPS systems to map out our trip. On our recent cross-country venture, we used both my car's internal GPS system as well as Waze. On this particular trip, I was relying on Google Maps, and Debbie was using Waze. I will pause the story long enough at this point to remind all the men within earshot to remember this imperative. Always listen to your wife. There are many reasons why this is a true statement, which will become apparent soon. But back to our story. Both GPS apps agreed on most of the trip, leading us up into Virginia on I-77 and to our exit. They even agreed on the first couple of turns on local roads to the point where we turned onto a gravel road. But we're still headed in what we thought was the right direction. It wasn't too far down this gravel road that our adventure or misadventure really began. Our friends had told us that about a big stone gate that we would pass through. And sure enough, we found that. Just past the gate, there was a road that headed off to the left with the same name as the road we were on. A road with a different name went straight as you passed through the gate. My GPS told us to take the road to the left. Debbie's told us to go straight. Another reminder, always listen to your wife. So we headed down the road to the left, which wound all around, up and down, further and further, not seeming to get anywhere. We finally reached a point where I knew we weren't in the right place, plus the reality that we had lost our internet signal and thus the GPS map. So we decided to turn around, go back to where we could get a signal and start over. So, second try. Following my GPS intently, I could see very clearly that we were supposed to take that road to the left after the gate and then make a right turn about a quarter of a mile or so down the road, a turn that I'd missed on our first try, a right turn onto Fox Den Lane. Now we were cooking because Fox Den Lane was the road where the cabin was located. I knew we were right this time. I'd been known to be stubborn, just to ask Debbie. And so off we went to the left again and turned onto what was supposed to be Fox Den Lane, but the sign gave it another name. That fact did not deter me in the least. Wasn't too long before we saw a sign that said dead end, which I thought was correct because our friends had told us that their house was the last one on the road. Now we were on the right track. Again, the road wound around up and down hills, getting narrower and narrower. After a little while, we were on this little two-rut road by the river, and all I could think about was the movie Deliverance. But on we went until we got to a place where I saw a house up ahead on a steep hill, but our Honda Accord could not make it up that hill. I got out and walked up and made sure it was the right house. It was. And I noticed another road coming in from the other direction, a much better road. Realizing that we had taken the wrong road, another reminder, listen to your wife, we backed up to where we could turn around and headed back where we came from. Road widened a bit and we headed back up one of those big hills that we had come down, but once again, this was a four-wheel drive hill and not a Honda Accord hill. We backed down to the bottom and tried to figure out what we were going to do now. We were stuck between two hills that we could not get over, and I really didn't know what we were going to do to get out of that predicament. It was at this moment that I saw one of those four-wheel drive cars, a Polaris, quickly making its way down that hill that we just tried to go up. Pulled up to our car, and a man jumped out, and he was not a happy camper. Didn't you see that dead-end sign and the no trespassing sign up the road? Don't you know you're on private property? He was really, really mad. We apologized profusely, telling him that we were obviously lost and we're just looking for our friend's cabin. After a few minutes, he eventually calmed down and said that they put the signs up because 3 cars had been towed out of there since Memorial Day. I guess feeling sorry for us, he said he would lead us through his little pasture and across his neighbor's backyard and then back up a much gentler hill to the road. He not only did that, but led us onto the road where we needed to go in the first place, the one that went straight through the gate. Listen to your wife. We were pleased to make our way from there to this amazing mountain home to begin our week of rest and relaxation in that beautiful setting overlooking the river. We found our way to our home for that week. In writing this sermon, I committed the grievous sin of eisegesis, that is, picking a topic and then finding a text that fits it. We preachers are supposed to do exegesis, find a text and study it to the point where a sermon emerges. But when Debbie and I experienced our lostness episode a few years ago, I knew there was a sermon there. Indeed, there was. The parable of the prodigal son, or as I prefer to call it, the parable of the forgiving father, would have been an obvious choice as a text as the basis for this sermon. Its message is crystal clear, and there have been countless sermons preached on its truths. But I was intrigued by what I found in reading through Psalm 119. Within its lengthy discourse, one passage jumped out at me with the familiar words of verse 105. Your word is a lamp before my feet and a light for my journey. Singer and songwriter Amy Grant, who, by the way, is Presbyterian, has given us the gift of the song by the same name that we've become familiar with over the years. Perhaps it can come to mean even more to us as we consider the words of the psalmist a little more intentionally. Throughout this 119th Psalm, we can see that God's will for our lives is not a place where we just plant ourselves down and consider our relationship with God, but rather it can be seen over and over again as a way, a route, a road. Maybe it can be easy then for us to see the metaphor of the road as the way of the Christian life. There are times when everything is peachy and wonderful, like we're on a smooth, just paved 8-lane superhighway. Then again, there are times, perhaps more often than not, that we take an exit ramp off that smooth road and we end up on a bumpy, barren, two-rut road that seems to be leading us to nowhere with more barriers and obstacles. But then the words of the psalmist ring in our ears. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light upon my path. Scholars tell us that we shouldn't have the image of a modern lantern in our heads when we hear these words. The lamp in the Old Testament world looked like a flattened teapot with one small wick. The light of this one wick only helped the bearer see one step ahead in the darkness. As one took one step forward, the light moved that much with them. God's light does not necessarily destroy the darkness, but rather helps us find our way through the darkness. God is with us every step of the way and never more than one step ahead. That is certainly a comforting reminder as we make our way through the dark places in which we find ourselves. God was certainly with Debbie and me in sending us help to guide us to our destination, our home for that week. We all have our own definitions of home because we each have our own life experiences that have helped us to define what home is for us. I think we can all probably agree, however, that home is certainly more than a structure. Home is a feeling. Home is warmth. Home is security. Home is friendship and fellowship. Home is love. Home is laughter. Home is church. First time Debbie and I worshiped with you here following my retirement, someone greeted me in the aisle before worship with the words, "Welcome home, John." Those 3 words filled my heart with joy. From 1989 to 2000, this was my home. It was where I met my wife and gained 2 amazing daughters as well. Memories of this place have filled my soul over the years, from Trinidad to Mendocino, from Juarez to West Virginia, Costa Rica, Montreat youth conferences, and too many retreats and trips to count. Youth choir musicals, A Season to Celebrate, Credo, and who can forget Joseph, an amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. There were too many Bible studies to count, and sitting at the feet of Charlie Williams was a blessing to my ministry. And this was my home for those 11 and a half years, But God had even bigger plans for me and my family. And the past 23 years have also been filled with so many examples of home. My ministry and service to the church has taken me places that I never dreamed. And yes, I'm grateful to be home. Sitting on the porch of the cabin later that afternoon, we were enjoying the peacefulness with the rocking chairs and the river rushing below and its calming presence. Breaking the calm, we heard off in the distance a motor and then voices. Coming up the same road that prevented us from making it to the house the first time was the man who had confronted and then helped us. Along with him were 3 other people. We heard them stop on the other side of the house, and so we went around to see what was going on. By the time we got around there, he was out of the Polaris and on the porch. He said, "My wife heard every word I said to you all, and she said that I needed to come over here and apologize." And she was right. Remember, guys, listen to your wife. We assured him that his apology was not necessary and certainly understood his response to our presence on his property. We had a wonderful conversation for 10-15 minutes, met his wife and the other couple that was with them. They were most gracious and friendly and welcoming. After they went on their way, as we walked back to the rocking chairs on the porch, I told Debbie, "Well, there's the end of my sermon." And so it is. A chance encounter led us to being the recipient of grace and light. Our lostness led us to experience the power of apology and forgiveness. Our journeys are about so much more than taking wrong roads and losing our way. Our journeys are all about using the lamp of light that is given to each of us to guide our feet along life's many roads. And today our journey has brought us here to worship together as brothers and sisters in Christ and to gather as a family in this home, in this place. We have found our way home. Thanks be to God.